Well, for more on the inflationary pressures and other economic challenges facing the U.S. and the world right now, I'm joined by Frank Nothaft. He's chief economist at CoreLogic. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Rachelle. Glad to be here.
So I want to have you first talk about COVID and its continued spread. Just how much is it impacting the global economy and efforts to really jumpstart it?
Well, it's really been a major disruption, and it's making it harder to maintain economic growth and get us back to the potential growth rates that we were at previously. For example, here in the United States, we saw a marked slowdown in economic activity during the third quarter of this year. Some of that reflects the fact that we had another wave of COVID spread across many different parts of the U.S. So we had been anticipating economic growth to be closer to 6.5% to 7% for this calendar year. But now with the more moderation in growth that we're seeing right now during the third quarter, we've ratcheted down our growth projections for this year to about 6% for the U.S. economy. So it's had a direct effect.
And obviously we're seeing countries trying to strike that balance between reopening and keeping their countries safe. And you've seen some countries, including Vietnam and Australia, really starting to change their policies towards the virus and open up their economies. At what point will this help the overall economic growth?
Well, that's important. And we saw that also here in the United States. As the United States was opening up earlier this year, people were getting back to work, getting back to their jobs. It really helped to promote economic activity. The same thing is going to happen in Australia and Vietnam as well. So countries that are opening up, lifting the shelter-in-place restrictions, are seeing more economic activity. And a lot of that activity is in-person interactions. So, for example, going out to a restaurant, going out to a bar, going out to a sporting event. Those are all adding to economic activity. And once shelter-in-place restrictions are lifted and people are going out, they're not only spending more money, it's creating jobs, putting people back to work in those in-person service occupations.
Now, obviously, as well as COVID dragging the economy in the U.S., there's also concern over the debt ceiling, government funding. You have these two big-ticket bills covering infrastructure and the domestic agenda. As the world's biggest economy, how do all of these issues factor into global economic growth?
Well, it has a big effect because the U.S. economy is such a central part of the global economy, and the U.S. dollar is so important for global trade as well. So it would be a major disruption to the U.S. economy, to the global capital markets, if we had some type of shutdown like that. It just really has a ripple effect, especially if it turns out to be extended. Now, hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully something is enacted in the 11th hour so that we can avoid any disruptions like that in capital markets with the ripple effects that we would otherwise see in the global capital markets.
And speaking of disruptions, obviously we have a lot of energy issues, problems in China resulting from their trying to cut coal. You have petrol shortages in the UK, thanks to these oil tankers not being driven, as well as Brexit, oil at record highs. Talk about the impact energy is having on a lot of these major economies right now.
Oh, it's having a big effect because it's raising the cost of producing goods. It's raising the cost of living. And that's affecting all of the major economies in the global in the world, and we're seeing it clearly here in the U.S. We've had the highest spike in inflation rates here in the United States that we have seen in a generation over the summer, and a lot of that was fueled by the run-up in energy prices. Now, in truth, that's off of a very low level of oil and gas prices 1 year ago in the second quarter of 2020 after the pandemic hit. And nobody was taking jets, nobody was driving, nobody was going anywhere. So we did see that crash in energy prices a year ago. So some of that run-up in inflation does reflect the fact that prices were extraordinarily low a year ago. But there's no question that rise is having a ripple effect and adding to inflationary pressures here in the U.S., in the Eurozone, and elsewhere in the global economy.
And just very quickly, the ongoing saga with Chinese real estate firm Evergrande scrambling to pay its debts. A lot of people wondering what kind of contagion could there be outside of China because of Evergrande?
Well, most of their activity was just internal, domestic within China. So now there may be some investors who hold some debt outside of China, but really most of it was really concentrated in China banks and with Chinese real estate. I don't think I wouldn't expect there to be a contagion effect that spreads throughout global capital markets. It could raise concerns about other real estate developers in China, though. So, but I don't see it really spreading out beyond China.
Always good to have you on. Frank Nothaft there, Chief Economist at CoreLogic.
Thanks for having me, Rachelle.